This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good morning, this is Frida Liu. You're listening to Race Again. Hetal Doshi from OSITE joins us again for this month. And of course, this is our Butterfly Effect series. Our topic this week is the invisible walls to driving performance. Now, performance is an obvious thing that organizations should be focused on and should always be focused on. Now, why is it that is so hard to drive performance? And that's my first question to you, Hetal. Hope you're well.
Thanks, Frida. So it's really hard to drive performance because that's the only thing that most organizations that I'm working with, that's the only thing that they're looking at.
Right.
And unfortunately, there are many invisible forces at play. And these invisible forces, or what we'll be talking about today, these invisible walls, need to be seriously addressed. And only if and when they are addressed will you be able to get the final goal being scored into the goalpost.
Right. And so what are some proven techniques to be able to drive performance?
So one of the ways that typically organizations want to drive performance is through some kind of conversation. So it would be a town hall, it would be, a particular feedback session or meeting. And so a critical foundation that needs to be established would be psychological safety, right? Yep. Google did a study recently. They're trying to find out which were the most successful teams that were performing at the highest level. They couldn't find anything in common across the 20 teams. They were all very unique compared to the next. But one thread that took it through all across all the teams was the fact that they all felt safe to be able to have conversations about the challenges and then to be able to turn it around into some kind of a performance goal. So performance, psychological safety is very important. But I think, Frida, if you listen to majority of speeches that are going around these days or conversations, everything is all around you must change and you need to make sure that you achieve a goal and that's about it. So how do you think people are actually going to feel when you give them no choice but to change, which everybody hates to be told that they need to change, and you have no choice but you need to perform? People don't feel safe. People feel threatened. And when you feel threatened, you always work on an offensive or defensive rather than moving towards a kind of flow.
Right.
Another thing that is very critical is the vibe. When a leader walks through the door, I think a lot of companies focus on culture, but actually it's a climate that is hanging in the air. A climate is something that it hits us immediately. It helps human beings know how to behave. For example, if you walk into a party versus you walk into a funeral. Right. So this is the first thing that we get when we meet our bosses or our leaders and we're going to have a performance conversation. What is the climate going to be like? The climate typically would be in two manners. Are you, as a leader, here to help me to be able to get to where we need to? Or are you going to exploit me? Right. And unfortunately, I think the majority sense of employees these days is a notion of we are all struggling here, and I know you're going to do as much as possible to exploit me before anything else. And so that's not a very useful thing. But the good news is that, there's a psychologist called Zimbardo, and he's researched a lot on this concept called the psychology of evil. A lot of leaders may be perceived as being a little bit more on the negative side of things, potentially and unfortunately. Right. But what Zimbardo has said is that we all have equal propensity for good versus evil. All of us. It's just which side are we going to be driving? Right. And with human beings, when we're trying to drive performance, drive a dream, we need to err on the side of caution about what is going to take us back many, many steps. And so which side are we going to be stepping on? Some of the valuable things to be doing would be, number one, asking for permission in conversations, meaning, guys, I'm going to need to ask for your permission. We're behaving or acting at this level. I need to ask for permission. I'm going to have to push all of us. Are you okay if I do that? The reason being human beings have thick skin, and I don't mean it in a bad way. We have 7 layers. And before we allow anyone to come into this sacred space and to push us in any direction, we need to allow them to enter. And so asking for permission is important. There's also something called wisdom in a name, meaning, are we talking about feedback? Are we doing a town hall? What are we doing? And when we did a bit of experiment, the one word that came to mind that would do well with everybody is stop calling it a town hall, a meeting, a performance, blah, blah, blah. Let's have a conversation.
Right. I mean, it's very interesting. You got me at vibes. And how do you measure vibes, right? You just know whether this person has, this person or, the vibe in the organization, the vibe when you meet someone, and how do you do that, right? And I guess when you talk about the 4 invisible walls, either these walls are up or either these walls are down, right? And what are these walls?
Well said. Frida, absolutely. Like, when you were saying, how do we measure these vibes, right? Coming to that, when we use this measurement, which is when I walk in the door, how do you feel? That's the measurement. Do I want to open the door or close the door? And
no, slam it in the face. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Slam it in the face or jump out the window, so to speak, as well. And so when we try to work with teams in organizations with regards to driving performance, there are 4 walls that we need to get to before we can begin to drive and push people to a higher level of operation.
Right.
So the first wall, some of these words may sound very, common and typical, but I really, really want to focus on the obvious these days, yeah?
Okay.
I think there's so much of insights in the obvious. So the first wall is the wall of empathy. And empathy is not about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's about activating a person's ability to talk about pain.
Right.
So the outcome of empathy is that it's not about me understanding. It is about you being able to talk to me about what is your pain. And so when business leaders straight away, they start talking about, here's the pain that I'm experiencing right now. What is the pain that you are experiencing? That is one and the only human connection that is the super strongest, and you can get that regardless of circumstance. When 2 people begin to talk about their pain, they can then move on to the next one, which is connectedness.
Right.
But before that, while I stay in empathy, which is an activation of you and I being able to talk about pain and our suffering, the problem that we see in organizations is that a lot of leaders talk about their pain,
right,
but when they talk about other people, they talk about their behavior. So what that means is that me as a business leader or as a leader, I'm going through a lot, the business is going through a lot, and you are just not good enough. You're just not doing well, you're not fast enough, you're not thinking out of the box, you're not agile, you're not empowered, you're not enabled, all these big buzzwords. But the truth is, if a leader has a story and a sense of their pain, then so does the other person. And so in psychology, we call this the actor-observer bias. Meaning, unfortunately, I have a story, but you only have a behavior. You don't have a story behind you.
Right.
And so empathy is a very important point of view to take, which is, what is the story behind why you are not able to be creative? What is the story about what is holding you back? What is the story about your circumstance right now? And we simply don't do that at all.
Right.
There's a lot of storytelling that's going on. People are getting upskilled in storytelling, telling their story, but we are not increasing our ability to activate other people's stories towards us as well. So that's the first wall. The second wall is then, okay, so now me and you, we both talk about the pain that we are experiencing with regards to what it is that we are hoping to do. The second one is then using it to connect with each other. Now, the unfortunate thing that I have seen in majority of the workshops that we're running and also in the surveys that we're conducting is that some leaders may be good at trying to understand the pain, but the moment I hear your pain, I negate it.
Okay.
Right? And then I'm like, yeah, okay, I know you've gone through it. I've also gone through it before, but then let's, just let's move past it. So we take the pain and we flick it away rather than taking the pain and really connecting with it. And what I mean by connecting with it is, rather than saying you are going through this, I am going through this, to take it all in, rein it all in and talk about what we are all going through. And only when you activate 2 people's empathy and you can kind of put it into a we kind of a situation, then you can begin to have the next wall. And some leaders, a lot of leaders will say, Hetal, why in the world would I want to talk about my story and my pain and blah, blah. I don't want to look like an idiot over there, blah, blah, blah. And so, that's why we bring in evidence-based research to organizations. And over here, we talk about the pratfall effect. The pratfall effect is basically a really, really cool phenomena that if you are a competent leader, first and foremost, you have to be a competent leader. But if you are a competent leader and you actually share your pain and you are able to connect your pain with somebody else, the person likes you at least 300 times more.
300 times, okay.
Yeah. So they actually fall in love with you. So they've gone into the love zone already. They've gone into that, I love this person because I see your pain, you see my pain, I feel you, you feel me, I love you, this person.
Right.
And the pratfall effect is, it takes place so subtly but so powerfully in the sense that before you share your pain versus after you share your pain, the person actually begins to think that you are more competent and more likable.
Right.
Just by sharing the story and connecting with somebody else. And that's very, very powerful. It's very powerful because if I like you, I will do a lot of things for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, you're explaining a little bit more earlier on. Before we get into the third bit, which is in compassion, right? When you talk about walls, right? Are you talking about walls as in barriers or are you talking about walls as in structures, as in it's keeping the building upright?
When I talk about walls, actually this word came about when we started doing workshops and we started getting people to have performance conversations. And when they were unable to do it, I asked them that one question of why was it so hard to get connected with this person and be able to have that further conversation or deeper conversation? They would always say, there seems to be a wall between us.
Right.
And so this is an invisible force that prevents or creates a resistance. So it prevents movement forward and it creates this obvious resistance that we don't seem to address. We just still keep wanting to like ram through this wall. But it's there. So when I talk about it, it's definitely an invisible energetic force between you and me, or between what you want and what I'm going to do for you.
Okay. I'm here with Hetal Doshi from OSIGHT. We're talking about the invisible walls to driving performance. Stay tuned. BFM 89.9.
Because friends matter. BFM 89.9, the business station.
You're listening to Race Again. Good morning, Frida Liu here. Hetal Doshi from OSIGHT joins us again this month in our Butterfly Effect series. And we talk about the invisible walls to driving performance. You talk about the 4 walls, empathy, connectedness, compassion, and performance. So you touch on empathy and connectedness, and then you get to compassion.
Yeah. So someone asked me the other day what compassion was, and I got her to read it out loud, and she had the shock of her life. Compassion is the ultimate distinction between human and animal. And if you don't have this, then, I think we really need to sit down and reconfigure who we really are over here.
Right.
Compassion is not about being nice. It's not about being kind. It is about ending suffering. And doing the right thing is basically termination of suffering. And when you terminate somebody's suffering, you have this psychological feeling of elevation, that I can rise above this now. And so what that means is, say, for example, a person is not performing. There are a lot of cases of people being invisible these days. Like, I'm trying to get to the person, but the person's unreachable. I don't know where they are and what they're doing. And so compassion would be, we need to end this suffering. Rather than just saying, okay, I understand your pain. Thank you for telling me that you have bad internet connection. I have also had bad internet connection in the past. Okay, I'll be nice to you. No, it's not about that.
Right.
If you've had bad internet connection, I understand what this is because I've been through it. But now we need to end the suffering. The suffering that needs to be ended is that obviously it is important for you to have internet connection and for me to be able to access you. We need to end the suffering for all of us from a team perspective. And unfortunately, Frida, this is the point where majority of people suffer the most. We are not able to tell the person. What we'll end up doing is that we will pussyfoot around the issue, but we will not tell them that this is the big problem and we need to terminate this issue or this suffering forever.
Right.
However, when I teach people to say we need to end the suffering that is going on, it becomes easier. You are suffering from this, I'm suffering from this, we need to put an end to the suffering. And that feeling of making a commitment that we will both put an end to the suffering releases this feeling of elevation, that we can move a little bit forward from this, that I have enough space to rise above this. But compassion is something that two people need to co-create. Meaning it is not the boss that makes a decision. It is a few people suffering in that conversation, and all of us need to co-create how they are going to end their suffering and how they're going to support each other with the end of that suffering. It's a very, very powerful experience because human beings only want one thing, which is, do you see me and do you feel my pain?
Right.
And if you care enough to end it, then yes, I'm going to do anything for you. And with that, we reach the final one, which is we then get a chance to talk about moving on to the next thing, which is the performance of the dream.
Right. Okay. So these 3 steps first before we talk about performance, huh?
Absolutely. And the last thing about performance is, again, wisdom in a name. I think organizations really, really need to terminate the use of KPIs and targets and even performance. Just use the word dream. What's the dream here? Because this is what people grew up saying when they were kids. Everybody had a dream. They didn't have performance goals. They didn't have KPIs. They didn't have targets. All these are corporate speak, the lexicon or the language that is not human. And so the one thing that I realized is, apart from the name, there is a misuse of this name for exploitation or capitalism, unfortunately, that immediately rubs a human being in the wrong way. The second thing is that we are simply not clear about it. I have heard at least 99% of the speeches that I've heard talking about pushing people to a certain level of performance, but it's not clear at all what is it that you really want. What is it? Right. I hear about, we need to be more agile, we need to be more creative, we need to be more entrepreneurial, you have to change, blah, blah, but what do you really want at the end of it? And so our brain can only activate the rest of our body to perform when, and it is using this part of the brain called the reticular activating system that is kind of connected with the pineal gland. Only when we are clear, like for example, I want Puan Siti's nasi lemak. Crystal clear. My whole body will just go towards that. The problem with organizations is that there is very little clarity. And those who are interested in understanding what clarity actually looks like, the only way to do it is to begin to draw it out. So stop writing it out and stop talking about it. Both and all should draw it out and ask each other as we go along, are we getting clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer? And is our picture looking more or less the same as well? And that becomes extremely exciting because human beings are naturally inclined to wanting to fulfill dreams before we die. So it's a very natural phenomenon as well. And this kind of takes us through the 4 walls.
Right. It's so interesting that the words that we should choose to use instead of, traditionally what corporate speak, as you would say, right? What are some performance models that we must look into to be able to deeply understand human performance, that whole process from the caterpillar to the butterfly?
Yeah. So again, caterpillar to butterfly is such a wonderful transformational visual. And 85 to 95% of the caterpillars will die. They will not make it alive.
Right.
And so that's the same for organizations. We're all hoping to transform. You really need to understand what are models out there that can help you to get from caterpillar to butterfly quickly and easily. So there are 3 maybe very quick models that I'd like to share. One is called the AMO, which is ability, motivation, and opportunity. Is the person actually able to do what you're asking them to do? I'm seeing a lot of companies shuffling and reshuffling, restructuring the companies, and then putting people in places where they don't have the ability.
Right.
So, and ability is a secondary thing. A lot of people become able even if they're not educated and not formally trained. The second thing, AMO, the second thing is motivation. Do they have the motivation to do this or not? When they walk in the door, do they actually walk in the company door or have they checked out a long time ago? Are they motivated? Are they not motivated? Motivation is a very, very interesting phenomenon. It doesn't take much to motivate someone. But the problem is that we are motivating them in a very, in my opinion, a very capitalistic kind of a fashion. Right. You do well, I keep you in the company, I give you more money, blah, blah, blah. You don't do well, probably out of here. I don't know how we're going to be able to keep having poor performance. And lastly, the unfortunate thing that I see in organizations is sometimes we do a lot of training and we motivate people, but we don't give them ample opportunities to be able to demonstrate it, learn, and get better and better and better. So AMO needs to work together. Are these all kind of intertwined? When I'm going to get my staff to do something, do I set them up for being able to do it through either personal learning, social learning? How do I get them motivated to it? And am I giving them enough opportunities to practice and come back again for learning? So that's one particular model. The other performance model out there, I think, is really valuable for those who are experiencing teams that are really, really burning out. This is called the DCS, which is, are the demands too high?
Right.
Do people have enough control? And are we giving enough support?
Right.
So this is a way of trying to see where the imbalance is with regards to performance. The demand is too high, the demand is high, the control is high, and the support is high. No problem. Which is why old school way of thinking, Frida, like the old school family businesses, right? They would never talk about mental health. They would just say, just get it done. And people could get it done. The thing is that human beings can always perform.
Right.
You don't have to remove the demands. We just need to increase the control and support. And lastly, if I can add, the ARC, there's the ARC model. I won't go into too much detail, but what it talks about is relatedness. The most important thing is, how do I feel in this group? Am I able to give and am I able to take equally? Or are you just taking from me? So is the giving and taking experience of performance significant enough for me to feel that I'm being taken care of versus exploited?
Right.
So these are definitely performance models out there. I think most companies are driving performance, but they don't have a performance model at all.
Right. And it's very interesting. You were talking about the demand bit, the DCS, there's a lot of demand. Sometimes there's no control, no support, right? And if they don't work in tandem, it's very difficult to get the best out of someone, right? Now, what's the one thing we fail to recognize in human performance?
Yeah, so there's a huge bunch of research that is coming out now that is that human performance, 50% of it is based on luck and chance. So when you ask leaders at the top, how did you get to where you got to? They would say, I worked really hard, but I think I got really lucky as well. I was really lucky because I had a good boss. I was really lucky because the timing was perfect. I was really lucky because there was a sudden crisis. That person died and I got the job. So they would say, most of them, men actually talk about their traits more than their luck or chance. Women talk about it the other way around. But both talk about the concept of attributes and chance.
Right.
So we really fail to recognize that sometimes people are just out of luck at a certain period of time in their life.
Right.
And they're just not in that right space to be able to get the right chances, and that's why they're not performing. And unfortunately, when you run out of luck and run out of chance for a little while too long, it ultimately gets into this mode of self-fulfilling prophecy, which is, I am a failure. But we don't understand so much of it has to do with luck or chance. I spoke to this amazing human being, and he's about 80 years old, super successful. And I asked him, what can you tell me about business that, the young ones don't understand? And he's like, you must understand that concept of giving a lot of respect to luck and chance.
Wow.
And inviting it into your life. And I was really blown away. I mean, this is not just, elder people talking about luck and chance and feng shui and whatever not. But research is coming up with a substantial 50% now that performance has so much to do with luck and chance. I'm not negating the fact that abilities and personality and competence are all equally important, but we are forgetting the fact that we should invite a lot more luck and chance into organizations.
Right. Okay. And, believe that the good will come to you, right? So I guess in your final thoughts around this and on what we should do in summary.
100% we start backwards. What do we really want? Try to draw it out. Don't write it out, and try to co-create the drawing. Then understand that in order to get a dream, there are so many little invisible walls that we need to get to. Right. If we have enough empathy, where we keep talking about pain, we can connect with everybody's pain, which is the fundamental human experience, and we can all co-create a mission to eliminate that suffering. Obviously, we'll feel a lot more engaged towards getting that dream. The second thing is understanding human behavior. If you don't understand human behavior, which is really understanding motivation, creating opportunities, and socially creating social learning experiences, also looking into, increasing the person's control and making sure that there's a lot of support and that there is enough of give and take that is going on rather than exploitation.
Right.
Majority of people really enjoy that process because all human beings would enjoy being stretched a little and they would love to know that they are growing. No human being, I've never met someone who says, Yes, I love to fail. I love to be completely useless. And lastly, I would say really take a good look at how you can increase all the chances to set somebody up for success.
Right.
How do you increase and open up anything and everything to be able to increase and open up these opportunities for success? Because unfortunately, in a world where we have a lot of fear and insecurity, we're literally like horses with blinkers and only looking forward rather than opening up this entire amazing field of potential.
Right. Another gem of a session. I've been speaking to Hetal Doshi from OSIGHT in our Butterfly Effect series, talking about the invisible walls to driving performance. She'll be back again next month for more gems. You've been listening to Race a Game. I'm Frida Liu, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.